On this episode of Doing the Most, we're doing a little call out to Reddit's r/Mead. Reddit's Mead sub has been making Mead Bread lately, or Mead loaf, typically using the lees or other yeast byproducts of a batch of mead to make bread, resulting in some questionable products and some successes. We make a lot of bread here in the Doing the Most household, and we thought, what if we did a multi-part series of bread made with mead? And that's exactly what we're gonna do. Starting with this episode, a sweet mead bread made in a coffee can. Oh, but first, we have this.
Homemade brews and various how-tos, everything from mead to roast, bake creation, fermentation, inebriation, doing the most.
You're gonna need a handful of ingredients for this recipe. So here's your shopping list. For the wet ingredients, 1 cup of heavy whipping cream, 1 cup of mead, a half a cup of honey, 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon of white vinegar, and 3/4 cup of vegetable oil. For the dry ingredients, 1 cup of cornmeal, 2 cups of whole wheat flour, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt. And this wouldn't be mead bread if we didn't include a nod to raisins, the perpetually reappearing ingredient in beginner meads. So optionally, you can add 1 cup of raisins. Also optionally, you can add a heavy pinch of clove and a heavy pinch of nutmeg. So this is mostly a dessert bread. It could also be used as a nice breakfast bread with a cup of coffee or milk. And we're gonna start by preheating a Dutch oven with a few inches of water, because this bread is gonna be steamed in coffee cans. These are the coffee cans that I have. Each of these cans is an 8-ounce can and will take half of our bread batter. You can see mine had these little pull tabs on the top. I left those on and instead used a safety edge can opener to open the bottom. So it's a nice clean cut on the bottom, and the bottom can be used as a lid as we seal the gasket and steam those. So we also have to prepare the mead, and part of the problem we have here with mead is that it includes alcohol. This particular bottle is a traditional mead at about 12% alcohol. And so we gotta get rid of some of that alcohol. We're gonna pour in here about 1.5 cups, and this is gonna cook down close to a cup. So pour that in a shallow saucepan, put it over a medium-high flame, and once that comes up to a simmer, set it on fire. This will flambe for a little while, actually, about a minute, minute and a half, and eventually the water steam will put the fire out, and that's how you know it's done. So once your flame goes out, cut the flame underneath and pour that back into your measuring cup. Mine resulted in just a little bit more than a cup of mead, so pour yourself off a shot and get that to 1 cup exactly, and pour that out to cool so it'll be nice and cooled down before we add it to our batter. Crack both eggs, no need to separate. And find a friend who really likes to whisk. Mine is this robot. And start beating your eggs. You're gonna want these to be fairly well beaten before you add your next ingredient. So that'll take a couple of minutes, and once that's done, drizzle in your cream. And from here on out, pretty much all the ingredients just go in one by one. There's not a whole lot of waiting or timing or any of that. This pretty much just goes ingredient by ingredient until your batter is incorporated. And you don't want to waste any mead, right? So pour yourself a glass while you work. Once all of that has become homogeneous, it's time to add our honey. This is actually a local honey from Oklahoma, pretty good quality honey, nice and runny. It's fairly fresh. I think this came off of this year's harvest. It's just got a nice, round, simple, floral quality to it. So then goes in our salt, and then our oil, followed by our mead, which is still a little bit warm. And so to temper the batter, I'm actually drizzling this using the surface tension down the side of that cold bowl. And then we add our cornmeal. and flour. And I will point out that this is a recipe developed in the Doin' the Most kitchen just for you Redditors. So I hope you enjoy this. It makes a ton, so take some to work. All right, in goes our baking soda, our spices, and you can see this is really coming together now, kind of like a thick waffle batter. And while that's coming together, you're gonna pour a little bit of vegetable oil into your coffee cans, grease those really well, and grease the lids, and then allow those to drain onto a paper towel. And lastly, our white vinegar. We're gonna let that go for about a minute, then cut the juice, and I like my Mead bread with raisins. So I am flouring the raisins here, and then the raisins are gonna be added in additions. The flouring of the raisins helps them suspend in the batter so they don't all fall to the bottom. So I poured in one small amount of batter, floured raisins go in, and then we're just gonna do that kind of in layers until the last layer is batter. Perfect. So the bottoms of our cans will go back on, and then we're gonna seal those in a sort of gasket with aluminum foil. And the aluminum foil will hold that lid down, but also allow some of the steam and air to escape. I added a little bit of hot water to this because my water had kind of boiled off, and so it doesn't appear to be simmering right now, but it's just on the edge. And then I put our cans of bread batter into the Dutch oven. That should come up about a third the way up. You can go as much as half up the container. And just a couple seconds later, I opened it up to confirm it is boiling. So we are going to drop the heat to a medium and let that cook for an hour and 40 minutes. At the hour and 40 minute mark, pop the top off of one of those and stick a toothpick in. Comes out clean, you know it's done. If it doesn't come out perfectly clean, give it another 5 to 10 minutes covered and try again. Very carefully remove these, noting that they are extremely hot. And those are gonna need to cool for about 10 minutes before you're gonna release them from the coffee cans. I just cool these on a wire rack, and of course, take a couple pictures for the Instagram. And while you're at it, a little bit of B-roll. Very carefully turn these out, and they should, just with a couple of shakes, come right out of the coffee can. And I know it looks a little strange, but it sure is a foolproof way to not burn your bread. Now you can see those steaming. We're gonna let those sit for about an hour, hour and a half before we cut into them. We want them to be mostly cool. So how do you carve a bread like this? Well, right down the middle works for me. Split those with a sharp serrated knife, and then line them up end to end. And then you're gonna split each of those halves in half. And then following that, you're gonna split each of those quarters into thirds. I ended up taking one of the experimental batches of this recipe up to work. It disappeared in almost a day, and it seems like these size slices were actually the perfect amount for a nice like coffee and Mead bread breakfast. And nobody was too scared off by the fact that mead was in this bread. I decided to drizzle mine with a little bit of local artisan honey, small batch, and dig right in. Now I'd made this recipe a few times and I felt like it was really dialed in, but on this taste test right here, I knew that I nailed it. And I was a little excited because I was finally going to be able to bring this to y'all, hopefully while the meme is still relevant. And here it is in all of its beautiful pumpkin-esque looking beauty. And while it may appear a little bit dense there, it's actually fairly light and fluffy. It's great with butter. It's nice heated up in the toaster. I'm hoping y'all give this a try. And this isn't the last mead loaf I'm gonna make. Here's a lemongrass and citrus mead that needs to be racked, and there's still a pretty healthy colony of yeast in there. So we're going to see about making some bread out of that. And that'll be on the next episode in this series, so please subscribe and stay tuned. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram and Pinterest at Doin' the Most OK.